Legal battle involving Nnamdi Kanu entered a new stage when a higher court began a detailed review of the life sentence judgment previously delivered in his case. The review focused on the conduct of James OMOTOSHO and the legal foundation used to impose the life sentence during the proceedings. The court began by examining the legal provision that had been cited during the sentencing stage of the trial. Lawyers representing Kanu submitted arguments stating that the law used in the ruling was not valid for the punishment that had been imposed.
Hello, my wonderful people, viewers and subscribers all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Happy Sunday to you all, and happy new week ahead. It shall be well with all of us today. Happens to be the 15th day in the month of March, and in the year of 2026. This month, okay, let's say this month is still at the early stage of it. But anyway, the message we carry us come this morning, this Sunday morning, is the appeal court overturns Kanu's life sentence, orders Justice James OMOTOSHO to pay Mazen Nnamdi Kanu compensation of 85 billion naira. Where OMOTOSHO go to see this kind of money? Anyway, I just say the guy collect money in dollars. He collect billions in dollars to jail Mazen Nnamdi Kanu, and that money is not being paid by Fulani government alone. Southeast businessmen contributed, Southeast politicians contributed, and what they call them, British also get hand involved in the amount they paid this man to carry out that injustice against the Onyendu Mazen Nnamdi Kanu. But anyway, let us not waste much time. I would like you to listen to this message from beginning to the end, and there also room for interjection if there is any error or if there is any correction that will need to be made. I will also pause the video, or rather the clip you are watching, and insert my own voice for better understanding, and I hope you get the point I'm trying to make here. Don't forget you now here we give you better reactions on videos, so please, as you are watching, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on all our social media handles, and it shall be well with all of us. Please enjoy the rest of this news, and make sure you keep on spreading this good news. Yes, spread this good news. Let it go viral, and so shall it be. Oya, regardez.
According to the legal submissions presented before the court, the statute relied upon in the judgment did not legally support a life sentence penalty in the circumstances of the case. During the hearing, the reviewing court requested complete records from the earlier trial. These records included the written judgment delivered by Justice OMOTOSHO, transcripts of the courtroom proceedings, legal submissions made by both the prosecution and the defense, and the statutory provisions referenced during the ruling. The court reviewed the documents carefully to determine whether the legal framework used during the sentencing stage complied with Nigerian criminal law and constitutional requirements. The panel examined whether the law cited during the judgment had been correctly interpreted and whether it could legally justify the punishment imposed. The review process also examined the sequence of events that led to the life sentence being delivered. The court considered how the charges were framed, how the trial was conducted, and how the final judgment was written and issued. Lawyers representing Kanu argued that the sentencing decision relied on a legal provision that was either improperly interpreted or not applicable to the charges before the court. They argued that the use of that legal provision created a fundamental error in the judgment. The reviewing court examined the argument by comparing the legal provisions cited in the judgment with the actual language of the statute. The court also examined previous judicial interpretations of the law and how it had been applied in earlier cases. During this process, the panel analyzed whether the law relied upon by Justice OMOTOSHO had the legal authority to support the life sentence punishment that was imposed. After reviewing the statutory framework and the arguments presented by both sides, the court identified a problem in the application of the law during the sentencing stage. The panel determined that the legal provisions cited in the judgment did not properly support the life sentence penalty that had been delivered. The court concluded that the punishment imposed during the earlier proceedings went beyond what the law could justify. The court stated that criminal sentencing must always be based strictly on laws that clearly authorize the punishment being imposed. Judges are required to ensure that the legal provisions used during sentencing are applicable to the charges and valid under the criminal statutes governing the case. The reviewing panel noted that when a punishment is based on a legal provision that does not properly support the sentence imposed, the judgment becomes legally defective. According to the court's findings, the life sentence decision delivered in Kanu's case relied on a legal foundation that did not justify the severity of the punishment imposed during the trial. Because sentencing decisions must follow strict legal standards, the court determined that the misuse of the legal provision created a serious judicial error. The panel explained that criminal courts must operate within the limits of the law at all times. When a court imposes punishment based on an incorrectly applied statute, the resulting judgment can be challenged and reviewed by a higher court. The reviewing court stated that this principle exists to ensure that criminal punishment is always supported by clear legal authority. During the proceedings, the panel also examined the role of the judge who delivered the original ruling. Justice OMOTOSHO had presided over the trial and issued the written judgment that imposed the life sentence. Because the ruling was delivered under his judicial authority, the reviewing court examined whether the legal reasoning contained in the judgment correctly reflected the requirements of the law. The court concluded that the sentencing stage of the trial contained a significant legal error connected to the use of the statutory provisions cited in the ruling. The panel stated that the improper use of the law directly affected the outcome of the case because it led to the imposition of a punishment that the law did not authorize. The court further explained that when a judicial decision is based on an incorrectly applied law, the consequences of that decision can extend to the rights and liberty of the person affected by the judgment.
As you are watching, please kindly subscribe. Follow us on all our social media handles. Like, share, comment. All the very important. Enjoy the rest of this news. Thanks in advance for watching from Okute Daily Talk.
Because the life sentence resulted from the application of a legal provision that did not properly support the punishment imposed, the reviewing court determined that corrective action was necessary. The panel confirmed that the misuse of the statute created legal harm to the defendant because the punishment imposed during the trial exceeded what the law permitted. The court therefore moved to consider the legal remedies available when a judgment is based on an improperly applied law. Judicial review allows higher courts to correct errors that occur during earlier proceedings. When such errors are confirmed, the reviewing court has the authority to take steps to address the consequences created by the defective judgment. After completing its examination of the trial records and legal arguments, the court concluded that the life sentence ruling required immediate judicial intervention. The panel confirmed that the improper application of the law during the sentencing stage formed the central issue in the case. With the legal error established, the court moved to determine what remedy should be applied to address the consequences of the judgment delivered under the authority of Justice OMOTOSHO. The decision marked the beginning of the next stage of the proceedings, where the court would determine how to correct the legal harm caused by the improperly applied law used in the life sentence ruling. After establishing that the life sentence ruling against Nnamdi Kanu was based on the improper application of a legal provision, the reviewing court moved directly to the question of legal remedy. The panel stated that once a court identifies that a judgment relied on a law that was incorrectly applied, the legal system must correct the consequences created by that judgment. The court explained that criminal proceedings must always follow strict legal standards. Sentencing decisions must be based on laws that clearly authorize the punishment imposed. When a court relies on a legal provision that does not properly support the sentence delivered, the resulting judgment becomes legally defective. In the review of Kanu's case, the court had already determined that the statute used during the sentencing stage did not legally justify the life sentence penalty that had been imposed during the earlier proceedings presided over by James OMOTOSHO. The panel therefore moved to examine the consequences of that judicial error. The court first considered the period during which the life sentence judgment remained in effect. During this time, the defendant was subject to the legal consequences created by the sentence imposed under the earlier ruling. Lawyers representing Kanu argued that the misuse of the legal provision had produced direct harm. They stated that the sentence imposed under the defective judgment affected the defendant's liberty and legal rights. The legal team presented arguments explaining that a punishment delivered through the incorrect application of the law constitutes a violation of the legal protections guaranteed during criminal proceedings. The court examined these submissions and reviewed the constitutional principles governing criminal trials. Under Nigerian law, individuals facing criminal charges are entitled to have their cases decided strictly according to valid legal provisions. The court emphasized that the authority of a judge is limited by the laws that govern criminal punishment. Judges may only impose penalties that are clearly authorized by the statutes applicable to the charges before the court. If a sentence is delivered under a law that does not legally support the punishment imposed, the court stated that the decision creates a judicial error that must be corrected. The reviewing panel then turned its attention to the remedies available when such an error occurs. Legal remedies in cases of wrongful or defective judgments can include the setting aside of the judgment and the awarding of damages or compensation to the person affected by the error. The court examined whether the circumstances of Kanu's case justified the awarding of compensation. During the proceedings, The defense argued that the life sentence ruling had produced legal and personal consequences for the defendant. The lawyers submitted that the improper application of the law created a situation where punishment had been imposed without valid legal authority. The court considered these arguments carefully. The panel noted that when a judgment causes harm because of a legal error committed during sentencing, the law provides mechanisms for remedying the consequences. One of these mechanisms is the awarding of compensation to the person whose rights were affected by the defective judgment. The court therefore analyzed whether the harm caused by the life sentence ruling could be addressed through financial damages. The reviewing judges concluded that the improper application of the legal provision during sentencing constituted a serious judicial error. Because the sentence was imposed under that error, the defendant experienced consequences that should not have occurred under the correct application of the law. The court determined that a remedy was necessary to address those consequences. After reviewing the legal principles governing compensation in cases involving unlawful judicial actions, the court confirmed that damages could be awarded as part of the corrective measures. The panel stated that compensation serves to recognize the harm created by a judicial error and to provide legal redress to the individual affected by the wrongful decision. The court then addressed the issue of responsibility. Because the life sentence ruling had been delivered under the judicial authority of Justice Omotosho, the court examined the role of the judge in the decision that relied on the improperly applied law. The panel confirmed that the judgment imposing the life sentence was written and delivered by Justice Omotosho during the earlier proceedings. The court stated that judges have a legal duty to ensure that the statutes they rely upon during sentencing are valid and applicable to the charges before the court. Failure to apply the correct legal provisions during sentencing can result in judicial decisions that produce unlawful consequences. The reviewing court therefore concluded that the responsibility for the defective judgment rested with the judicial authority under which the sentence was imposed. After completing its analysis, the court delivered its ruling on the remedy. The panel ordered that compensation be awarded to Nnamdi Kanu for the legal harm caused by the improper application of the law used during the life sentence judgment. The ruling stated that the compensation was connected specifically to the consequences created by the defective sentencing decision. The court directed that the damages be enforced according to the legal procedures governing civil compensation orders issued by Nigerian courts. Court officials were instructed to record the compensation order as part of the final judgment issued during the review proceedings. The panel clarified that the purpose of the compensation was to address the harm created by the misuse of the legal provision during sentencing. The order formed part of the broader corrective action taken by the court after determining that the life sentence ruling had been delivered under an improperly applied statute. With the compensation order issued, the court then moved to finalize the remaining directives connected to the case and the legal consequences arising from the defective judgment.
Ana akụkọ aka ihe ka ị ga-esi gbacha ndị mmadụ na-echi mmụọ ana watch this na akọkwa aka na comment. You understand, because this is a very good news to the hearings of you and me. So please, watch, comment, commend the people who have been doing all these things to make sure that you get the required news you need on your daily basis. Continue watching, please.
After issuing the compensation order in favor of Nnamdi Kanu, the reviewing court moved to finalize the legal consequences connected to the earlier life sentence judgment delivered by James Omotosho. The panel stated that once a court establishes that a judgment relied on an improperly applied law, the legal effects of that judgment must be addressed through clear judicial directives. The court first returned to the central issue that had led to the review of the case, the use of a legal provision that did not properly authorize the punishment imposed during the earlier proceedings. During the review stage, the panel had already determined that the life sentence ruling was based on a statute that was incorrectly applied during sentencing. Because criminal punishment must always be grounded in valid legal authority, the court stated that a sentence imposed under an improperly applied law cannot remain legally valid once the error has been identified. The reviewing judges therefore issued a directive addressing the status of the earlier judgment. The panel formally set aside the life sentence ruling that had been imposed during the earlier trial. Setting aside the judgment meant that the legal consequences attached to that sentence were removed from the official court record. The court explained that when a higher court determines that a lower court decision relied on an invalid legal foundation, the appropriate corrective measure is to nullify the defective judgment. The order removing the life sentence from the record marked the first of several directives issued during the final stage of the proceedings. The court then turned its attention to the legal status of the defendant following the decision to set aside the earlier ruling. Because the life sentence had been nullified, the panel directed that all legal records connected to that punishment be updated. Court registries were instructed to amend official case files to reflect the decision that the sentencing judgment had been overturned. These administrative updates were necessary to ensure that the official documentation of the case accurately reflected the outcome of the judicial review. The court then addressed the compensation order that had been issued during the previous stage of the proceedings. The panel confirmed that the compensation awarded to Konu would remain part of the final judgment. The court stated that the damages were directly connected to the harm created by the improper application of the legal provision during sentencing. The compensation directive therefore remained enforceable as a remedy for the legal consequences created by the defective judgment. Court officials were instructed to begin the process required to enforce the compensation order according to the procedures governing civil damages issued by the courts. The reviewing panel then addressed the broader legal implications of the ruling. The judges stated that criminal courts must exercise their authority strictly within the limits established by law. Sentencing powers are not discretionary beyond the statutes that authorize specific punishments. The court emphasized that judges must ensure that the legal provisions cited in their rulings are valid and applicable to the charges being decided. Failure to apply the correct legal provisions can lead to judgments that exceed the authority granted by criminal law.
Stop gambling with your money. Invest 28 days in AI instead. The only investment that can't go to
occur. Higher courts are empowered to review and correct the consequences of those decisions. The panel explained that the judicial review process serves as a safeguard designed to ensure that criminal punishment remains consistent with the legal framework established by the Constitution and statutory law. The case involving Nnamdi Kanu demonstrated how that safeguard operates when a sentencing decision is challenged on legal grounds. After establishing that the life sentence had been imposed through an improperly applied statute, the reviewing court used its authority to remove the defective judgment and provide legal remedy for the harm created by the ruling. The court also directed that all administrative steps required to implement the decision be carried out immediately. Court registries were instructed to circulate the final judgment to the relevant legal authorities and ensure that the ruling was properly recorded within the judicial system. This process included updating case records, documenting the removal of the life sentence, and registering the compensation order within the official legal documentation connected to the case. The panel stated that these administrative measures were necessary to complete the implementation of the court's directives. The final judgment also clarified that the decision delivered during the review proceedings represented the official legal conclusion of the matter examined by the court. With the life sentence ruling set aside and the compensation order confirmed, the court declared that the corrective measures required to address the defective judgment had been fully established.
So my people, when I don't hear the message, that is the end of Solomon Grundy, and I would like you to do me a favor. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Follow us on all our social media handles. And a few comments here. It is time our courts cease to be courts of injustice. The judicial remedy is jail. Jail OMOTOSHO, free Nnamdi Kanu, and award him the compensation of 87 billion naira to be paid. And it must be paid by James OMOTOSHO. And waiting this our brother Toko. Abu Selinke said, is the evil thereof. The python is still waiting. Divide Nigeria and save lives. Enough is enough. My people, now here we go take a break, and I'll go hear more first again. When I come back, please like, share, comment, and make sure you keep subscribing for more interesting videos. Have a nice day, and may the good Lord continue to bless us all. Kachineke meziokwu.